Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the justBernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
But without further ado, I'm very happy today that we have Mark Nepo joining us. Mark Nepo is a poet and philosopher who has taught in the fields of poetry and spirituality for 40 years. He is a New York Times best-selling author of the Book of Awakening and has published 14 books and recorded 8 audio projects. So without further ado, let me welcome Mark Nepo to the show. Hello, Mark. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this show for several months now, and we're very happy that with your help and the help of Viva Editions, we were able to get you on today. So welcome. Let me ask you, Mark. First of all, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name. Is it Nepo or Nepo?
Nepo.
Nepo. Oh, I've been saying it correctly. Very good. Now, Mark, you are the author of you're the latest book is Reduced to Joy, and you were on the New York Times bestseller with the Book of Awakening. Can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a poet and a published poet and philosopher?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm 62, and it began with birth. No, we won't start there all the way back. But no, I think at an early age, before I had any language for any of this, I just had an innate sense that I was part of something larger. That it wasn't just me. It just wasn't the circumstances around me. There was something else that I couldn't name that kind of held everything together. And, as I got into high school, I mean, the real earthly kind of first thing that threw me into writing was that the first woman I fell in love with, first love, she dumped me and broke my heart, and we all go through that. But, I wasn't a loner in high school, but I had a lot of acquaintances, but for me, I didn't experience real friendship until I was in college. So at that time, I just began writing as a way to talk to myself, to try to get through that initial heartbreak. And of course, later on, I realized I wasn't just talking to myself. I had begun a conversation with the universe. And so as I went on my way, I started to always feel a sense of wonder. That's where the poet is the part in us that retrieves the wonder and the hard lessons out of suffering. And the philosopher in me is the part in me that's really trying to make sense of what is retrieved. So I think as I got into my 30s, I'm a long-term cancer survivor. I went through a difficult the heat of it was a 3-year period in my mid-30s. But, all of a sudden, life was changing me, and I had very little control over anything. And instead of trying to write great poems, I needed to discover true poems to help me live. And so the proper use of expression showed itself. And, all these years, later, I have to say, I really, now, I want to be the poem.
Yeah. And who can't remember the that first heartbreak in high school, and how many of us did probably write poems about it? And it's such a beautiful thing to hear how this was kind of the awakening of your talent.
Well, yeah, and I think every person has a gift, and much in the way that you take a match, and it has all that light in it that is dormant until it's struck against something. And so I think every life has a gift that, like that match, is not really awakened until we are struck against the life of experience. And that means that strike isn't always easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just annoying, and sometimes it's devastating. But the thing that we need each other for is to help us never forget that it's the light that comes out of the strike that matters.
Yes, here, here, and it's a beautiful thing how I hear that story over and over again with so many different, whether it be authors or teachers or radio hosts or people who have found, I guess, for lack of a better term, the calling to empower humanity. It's always that, like you said, and I love the way you said that. It's the strike, it's the match strike against something that brings out that light. And what a beautiful way to analogize that. Absolutely. It,
Well, and we could for a moment, as long as we're with that
yeah.
analogy, I think that when we fall sometimes and mistake the strike and not what's lighted from the strike, when we fall in love or feel we need that strike, that's kind of the story of addiction in any form.
Hmm.
Is when we feel, oh, I got to keep striking against something. That's it. When that's not it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. You're bringing something up. You're bringing something within me actually that I remembered similar to that, and that's the whole epiphany moment when we have that epiphany, whether it be whether when we're in our 20s or teens or 30s, and wanting to relive that moment and share that moment with everybody else, and not understanding that it's the moment that is the stimulant for your growth, and that you're never going to relive that moment again, and finding the addiction to try to find that moment again. And I feel that's has a lot to do with addictions, is people trying to bring themselves back to that happy high or that happy emotion or whatnot.
Yeah, it's a humbling kind of I think part or dynamic of life that those moments, those peak moments, they can't last. We can't live there forever.
Hmm.
We're human beings. That is, the human is very, very finite, and the being is infinite. So we're kind of like born like lightning in a bottle, and so I think so much as I get older that the whole practice of being a spirit in a body in time on earth is this magnificent, messy container of being human that no one can escape. It's not easy. It's difficult at times. It's confusing. There's pain. There's worry. There's fear. But there's immense beauty and wonder and the beauty of truth when we stumble into it, and the depth of friendship. The word friendship, actually, its Indo-European root comes from the Germanic languages, and it means place of high safety.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that great? I just love the words have such wisdom in them. Place of high safety. That's that's what it means to be a friend.
Yeah. It's very funny. I was just watching a program, and they had, I forgot who was the person who coined the phrase, but they said a true friend is judged during their hard. A true friend is, I don't want to say judged. I forgot the word that was used, but shows himself not just during the hard times, but during the times of conflict. when we rise and become the real friend.
Yeah, I think, being we all need honest friends to help us see all of who we are. We can go back, to Plato, who said that we're all born whole, WHOLE,
Hmm.
but we need each other to be complete, which is a beautiful truth and paradox. We have everything we need in each of us, but until we're in relationship with each other, with life, with experience, with love and suffering, then we don't get a chance to live fully and be complete.
That's very, very true. To kind of change the subject a little bit, because I am very curious. I'm
Sure.
curious about your book, the Book of Awakening. I don't know much about it. I love the title. I know that it was your number one New York Times bestseller a while back. Can you just give a quick synopsis of that particular book?
Yeah, well, this book, it's a spiritual day book. That is, there's an entry for every day of the year. And, it came because actually it was published in 2000
Oh, wow.
and many, many years ago. And, um, you know, on the other side of my cancer journey, I had seen, in not just in cancer rooms, but in recovery rooms, in all kinds of groups where people get together, whether it's through Narcotics Anonymous or Sex Addicts Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever it might be, people were using these day books. They
Yeah.
were used. I mean, they were really used. You'd find them in cars. They'd be in people's coats. They'd leave them in cafes. They'd be in bathrooms. I mean, they were used and beat up. And it really like occurred to me, that's like a modern form. Like if I could fill that with small doses of what matters, it might be a helpful tool. It might be a way to give back, not just to people who've gone through cancer, but to anyone going through life, just through our journey. And so I began. It was a 3-year journey of, and as a lifelong teacher, it was a place for me to share other voices. So every day there is a reflection, a story, metaphor, a teaching, and I start each one with a quote from someone else. And it sounds like it would have been like, well, a little thing for every day. Well, boy, that turned out to be a bigger project than I thought, and it took 3 years to put it together, and it had a real kind of underground word of mouth, word of heart life for 10 years, and then someone gave it to Oprah about 3 years ago for her birthday, and she really connected with it, and brought it to a much wider audience, and it's now translated amazingly into like 25 languages.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? That's fantastic.
It's
And
astonishing.
and I take it that was the beginning of your friendship with Oprah.
Yes, yes. And I have to say one more kind of thought on the translations before we move into
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
that of all these, it's just astonishing for anything to be translated to see that very surreal. But there's one that's in Russian, and my grandmother came from Russia, at the early 1900s. Came here, learned English, and for that really touched me to take in, like, okay, literally like 100 years later, her grandson turns out to be a writer,
Oh, wow.
and something that came from her is translated back into her original tongue. That really touched me.
It's like full circle, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like a completion of a journey. Absolutely beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And so let me ask you about the Book of Awakening. So Oprah got your book. Were you brought in for the book club, or is that kind of how it all began?
Well, it came in. I had a wonderful call saying that she wanted to interview me, and I first was interviewed by her on her Soul Series XM radio show,
Hmm.
and we did a couple of interviews. We did within about 6 months. We did a couple of interviews there, and wonderfully got to know each other. And I have to say, she is so supportive and genuine and has such a deep heart. I mean, she's such a bridger. And then I was invited back maybe a year later to be on Super Soul Sunday to film an interview. Um, and then last May, I was part of a panel that she moderated, taking a spiritual, larger perspective look at news events, and that was on TV as well. And I was on the panel with wonderful people, Elizabeth Lesser and Reverend Ed Bacon
Mm.
from All Saints Church in Pasadena. And then just this fall, I with 7,000 Ways to Listen and Reduced to Joy, I was invited back to just this past month. There were 2-hour shows that aired where we took our conversation deeper. And it just has been an amazing journey, as you could imagine.
Oh, I believe it. Absolutely, absolutely. And are you still writing for the blog?
Oh yeah, yep. I'm still writing and for the blog, and also still working on many books. I spend my time teaching and speaking and writing, and the rhythm, which not just for a writer or a teacher, but we all have that rhythm between solitude and community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that we all need. It's interesting. This is a kind of a funny paradox, but I'm sure you'll identify. But when I was younger, especially when I was in high school or college, when I discovered like true solitude, and that's where we all kind of discover nature and the
Mm-hmm.
larger universe, and those epiphanies you mentioned. And so, oh my God, I would love to have time alone, and then I couldn't wait to be with others. Share whatever I found, or get tired of being by myself. And as soon as I was with others, I couldn't wait to be alone again. And I thought, when I was younger, I thought, well, what's wrong with me? But really, I've discovered that this is a natural rhythm that we actually need. There are many kinds of fish, especially air breathing, like mammals, like whales and
Mm-hmm.
dolphin,
Mm-hmm.
that they have to go between the surface and the deep. They have to go up and down, above and below, and likewise, it's the soul's journey. We have to go. We have to spend time alone, and we have to spend time in community. And it's if we're too long alone, then we only hear ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't become good company. and and the cost of being too long in community without renewing our original vision is that we tend to give ourselves away in order to belong.
Mm.
And this has gone on forever. These are journeys that every human being has to make their way through.
And first of all, I must agree with you. I believe that, I mean, even for me personally, at this point, I am searching for that time alone due to responsibility. I've just been kicking and screaming like I need to have a week alone. I need to be left alone. But hopefully, in January, I'll find that time.
Good, good. Take it.
I have all these projects that, myself, I'm working on a book as well. And it's like, okay, I need to have that 2 weeks to kind of put everything together and get everything flowing. So I personally can relate to what you're saying. And I'm sure that, many people can relate to that whole realism. That's realism. It's life. So Mark, your book, and we're going to talk more about it, but the next book, the book that has recently been released, which I have to say I've been enjoying as far as I like to call it bibliomancy. What did I need to hear today? And your book is it's called Reduced to Joy. It's your most recent book, is that correct?
Yes, yep, that's the most recent one.
Wonderful. And you're with our friends over at Viva Editions. And what a wonderful publishing company they are, I have to
Oh,
tell
they're
you.
fabulous. They're fabulous. Brenda Knight, the publisher, and the whole team, they're just wonderful people, and they're so supportive, and they've done a beautiful job with this book. I'm just so grateful.
Yes, they really have. And they're, like I said, like you said, they're a really awesome team. But for everybody listening, the new book is called Reduced to Joy, and we're going to be speaking more with Mark after the break. We're going to have a break coming up here in just about a half a minute. I believe they changed my scheduling here, so forgive me if I babble for the next 20 seconds. I never know. It's like I don't know if it's the time change or whatnot, but what used to be exactly on the dot is now 5 seconds off or something like that. But I want to let everybody know that you can find out more information about Mark Nepo at, of course, marknepo.com. That's marknepo.com. Actually, right there on the front page, you can see his clips on his Super Soul Sunday interview with Oprah, 7,000 Ways to Listen. That should be wonderful. When I get a few moments, I'm going to be able to sit down and watch it myself. Are they the whole clips, Mark, or are they trailers?
No, they're just clips from the whole episode. Yeah.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are here discussing with Mark Nepo, his career, and now we're going to be talking about his new book, Reduced to Joy. And I've got to tell you, first of all, I love the way that the book is written. It's written in how shall we say, short poems and or philosophical observations, and I love that about it.
Thank you.
I really do, and I've got to say that as I thumb through the book, I'm looking during the break. I was like, let me see if there's a passage that I didn't that didn't catch my eye. Well, something did catch my eye. And it goes a lot with of what we talk about here on the Just Bernard Show, and of course from G.I.C. Productions, the passage called "The Industry of No."
Oh, yes,
That
yeah.
is brilliant, and it really speaks to
Oh,
me. It really speaks to me.
well, thank you. Let me read that, and then we can
Yes,
talk
could you
about it.
please? That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. And so let me just preface it by saying that, so much of life requires us to say yes. Not yes in the terms of being obedient or yes in accepting exactly everything as it's given to us, but yes in engaging in the practice of being human, in leaning in to life. But we live in a world, in a culture, I think we always have, but it's more so even today, that is full of no, N-O.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't. No, you shouldn't. No, you won't. So this is kind of a parable, if you will, a little story about someone called the Industry of No. He was born in the river of yes, but looking for love wandered into the industry of no, where the no police left warnings of don't, and the no ministers preached their morals of can't, and soon he couldn't help himself. He wanted to try on no. So when his dog pawed his shirt, he scolded her no. And when two kids ran a shopping cart into his parked car, he cuffed them no. And when someone he liked started to come close, he let her near but said he wasn't ready. Now he discovered there were other ways to say no. When he was hired as a no engineer, he was sadly happy to work alone. Steadily, He designed signs that said stop and electric guns that fired bullets with a muffled no. The work of no kept him very busy. If you called, you heard, I am the engineer of no, and I am not here. If you like, leave a no message, and I will gladly send a no reply. He was flooded with calls. The industry of no was so successful, it had to hide its money from the government lest they say no. When he was promoted to find other avenues of no, he rode no planes to no cafes, where inventors of no pleaded for new no funding. Soon there were movies that glorified no, and books that pondered why the no god was so insistent on no, and seminars arose where no scholars came vast distances to say, yes, it has always been a world of no. And those specially invited stroked their worried chins, whispering to each other, it is so, as a no anthropologist traced the beginnings of no. But they all went home and dreamt of white geese flapping, their wings parting the ancient air.
Absolutely brilliant, and
Thank
I
you.
love it. I love it. I love it, and it's so akin to where our society is and the way that whether we're programmed by our media, by our parents, or as you said, the industries of no.
Well, and so let's talk about it for a minute,
Yes,
and
please.
and first to give an insight into how poems come. So I didn't know where that was going. I didn't know that it would end with the image of the geese flying in their dreams.
Right.
I discovered that as I went along. I followed the story, and then so the poems are teachers, and then I need to spend time with the poem so I can understand what it has to teach. So, I was myself surprised that that's where it ended. And as I was with it more and more and more, so when geese or any birds, herons, eagles, when they fly, what happens when they lift their wings and when their wings are full spread? Well, their chest moves forward.
Mm-hmm.
They can't fly. Their wings can't be fully extended without their heart leading. So you can't, likewise us, we can't fly, whatever that means for human beings, unless our heart leads the way. And this is an amazing image about what it means to say yes to life. We need to open our hearts and lead with our hearts, whatever it is. So it's an amazing. Like I didn't know that. It wasn't like, oh, well, I'll arrive at that and I'll share this wisdom. But no, I didn't. I learned that as a reward for uncovering the story after my own frustration of needing to lean into life and say yes and finding no everywhere. And so it's also interesting that, this has been going on forever. And, Shakespeare gave us a great, great lesson and model for yes, but, for saying no, for going, oh, maybe.
Mm.
And that's the character of Hamlet.
Mm.
Hamlet is this immensely gifted and sensitive young man. And whose father is, in the play, his father is murdered, and this throws him into, of course, a life crisis. But every time his heart tells him what to do, he questions it and ruminates and deliberates on it until he talks himself out of living. And you could almost use Hamlet as a verb. You could say, oh, did you Hamlet yourself
Yes.
today?
I may have to start using that. It's that same thing as we say, shooting yourself in the foot. We're known for shooting ourselves in the foot.
But the miracle of being human is that at any moment, all we got to do is open up and lead with our heart. and we will be pulled out of whatever confusion we're in.
I couldn't agree more with you. And if I can share a short happening anecdote that happened yesterday, I believe.
Sure.
I have been on a campaign to bring the words "I love you" back into our vernacular. So many people are very afraid of saying, even to their best friend, "I love you," or to their mother, "I love you," or to their pet, "I love you." Just to say those words has become such a it's become unpopular. And to give you an example, and I think this is the reason why I can align with that poem that we just read so much, is I'm very friendly on our Facebook page. I'm very personal. I like to interact with the people. We have almost 200,000 fans on our Facebook page, and
Wow.
and it's kind of strange to, here I am presenting myself to 200,000 people at any given moment. But the other day, yesterday, I wished everyone a very wonderful week. Feel empowered, and I just want you to know that I love you. And one of the comments, and this is what hit me very funny, someone wrote, "Awkward, you said the I phrase." And I was like, that's exactly why I said it. That's exactly why I said it. We are so conditioned to, like you said, not express from our hearts, not lead from our hearts, not be guided from our hearts. And I like you, I believe that is a part of enjoying your humanity and enjoying life itself.
Well, and I agree with you that we need to reclaim the original meaning and depth of things like love, and like simply saying yes. And it's so interesting that we learn, when we're little infants, and this is part of the mystery. Okay, when we're infants and we're first here, we don't understand subject or object. Everything is one. We are whatever we taste, smell, everything. We don't have a sense of where our body ends and the world begins. And then, in order to live in the world, we learn how to differentiate, around 1.5 or 2. Oh, now we have me and mine and you and yours, and we start to know that there's an I and a you. And we spend most of the journey of life negotiating that on the surface, only to arrive back. Any sage or saint in any tradition, whoever you think they are, these are people who have wound up back at that place where they don't need an object to trigger their love, or a person, or a thing. Their love emanates like light from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this return to a sense that, it's all one. There's no difference between you and me. So yes, we can love everything and everyone.
Absolutely, and not in the sense of a cliche, in the sense of an emotional backed energy, so to speak.
Well, and it's really interesting because we've become such a, the mind is a great gift, but it's a tool.
Yeah.
And to me, it serves the heart. So, we can abstract things. We learn very quickly, but there's a big difference between thinking I love you,
yeah,
between saying I love you and holding someone with love. And the act of saying I love you it's like sheet music. You can't hear it until it's played.
Yeah. That's very true. In reference to your book, Mark, you chose the title "Reduced to Joy," and I found that, of course, it got me. The philosopher in me was like, "Well, what does he mean by that?" So I have you on the show, so I can ask you directly. What is
Sure.
the meaning of "reduced to joy"?
Well, I think that in life there are many ways that we grow, but two in particular are that we willfully shed things that no longer work, like snakes and crabs shed their skin, or we're broken open. Usually it's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
But if you imagine, you look at nature, and in nature, we call it erosion, but the nature elements in nature, trees, mountains, you know, everything lives through the weather of nature, and if they survive it, they are reduced to their beauty.
Mm.
You know, we go on vacations and we go to see these beautiful cliffs that are worn by the sea. Well, I'm sure, you know, we don't know how stones speak, so I'm sure they're saying this hurts like hell. But they're worn to their essential beauty. So I've come to understand through my cancer experience, through just living all these years, that I think that's what happens to us. I think love and suffering and circumstance and the weather of experience, if we can hold each other up, it's almost that nature, life by design, is hard enough that it requires us to need each other. And that's where love comes in. And that if we hold each other up, we will be reduced only to what's essential. We will be worn away to our beauty. We will be reduced to joy. All that will be left, like those cliffs pounded by the sea, are wonder and joy. So the poems, which there's 73 poems, I think, in the book over 13 years. So let's see, they go back. I guess the oldest poem goes back to my late 40s. And over this last decade or a little more, is my own kind of journey and understanding and learning about the ways in which I've been worn away of what's not important and what's not real and what's not essential, and I become more simple and more deep and more present. And so the poems are the trail of that kind of learning.
Right. And that is, I hope that is a part of most people's lives where we get the wisdom of experience as well as the, how should I say, the education of understanding what it is that we don't want within our lives. And they're
absolutely
down to that beautiful diamond of spirit, which is, I guess, as we were saying here, in this terminology, would be the joy of life.
Absolutely. Let me read you a short poem from the book called
Sure.
One String. I am so busy at times trying to make it all worthwhile that I am stunned at how easily the whole of life speaks to me. When music I've never heard or a truth I never understood pluck the one string I carry deep within. I only want that string plucked, and yet it stays in a place only suffering or surrender can open. Still, violins and minor keys make me swallow my fear, and herons flying into the end of a long day make me wish I'd led a more peaceful life.
Mm-hmm. And that is definitely truth for many of us.
Well, again, you know, in any one moment, I think our job is to feel wherever we are completely. That's what leads us to another possibility.
Yes.
So, you know, it's totally, I can feel depressed today or weighed down. And it's not like about not giving in to it. It's about feeling it so that it can move through us the way wind moves through a flag. Then we're free to feel again. Then we're free to begin again. You know, so it's when we hold on to what moves through us that we're carrying it and it grows.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I've learned also, and I've written about this in 7,000 Ways to Listen, but that what is not expressed is depressed.
And I can see that how that could be possible if we're not, if, well, the way that you just explained everything to me is like life is fluid. It's almost a very Taoist observation of our consciousness. I agree. One moment we can be depressed, one moment we can be sad, one moment we can be happy, we can be thrilled, we can be angry, but it doesn't mean that that's who we are. And it's
no, and this speaks to, so you
Yeah.
know, this speaks to what a notion about what peace is all about. You know, we tend to think, because life gets difficult, that If I can get away from trouble, I'll have a peaceful moment. If I can get away from difficulty, the end of difficulty is peace. Well, I'm starting to understand that peace is the ocean of being that holds all difficulty. So if you imagine you see the sea and there's thousands of waves, and every mood and feeling that we could experience as human beings is like a wave in that sea.
Yeah.
Anger, confusion, sorrow, alienation, whatever you want to name it, happiness, but joy is the ocean of being that holds the depth that holds all those feelings. Now, of course, they're all one sea. We don't get out of feeling all those surface waves,
Right.
but only when we drop down. Our job is to be both in the depth and on the surface at the same time. And that's a practice nobody taught us in school.
No, that's very true. I believe, I forgot if it was, I don't know if it was Ram Dass or Joseph Campbell, one of my old time favorites. Said, we must find the place where we become the observer of life. Not saying we cannot participate in life and not enjoy the ups and the downs, but not to take it so personally.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. And of course, that's so hard to do, isn't it?
Yes,
it's really hard. Another reason, that we need each other.
Very, very true. We've only got about 2 minutes left on the segment. I can't believe how quickly this hour has gone by, Mark. So thank you for being here with us. But before we go, I have one last thing I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
And this is my famous question I love to ask all of our guests. If you knew that the entire human population was listening to the show right now, what would the one message be that you would like to impart on everybody?
Well, and thank you for that question. that everything we need, first off, that our job is to be completely who we each were born to be as alive as possible, and that each person has a gift within them that only meeting life head on will reveal. We have everything we need already within us. It's the life of experience and of relationship and love that introduces us to our gifts.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. And thank you again for joining us today. Again, everybody, Mark Nepo's book, new book, is called Reduced to Joy. You can get more information about Mark at marknepo.com. And coming up just after the break, we are going to be joined by the Hollywood Temptress, Terry Joyce, comedian, activist, and also G.I.C. administrator. And we look forward to having her on. And again, just after the break. And just once again, one last time, thank you so much, Mark. And I'm really happy you were able to join us today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's great to be a part of your good work, too.
I appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.